You all had to hear me whine about overrated coasters earlier this week. So let's flip the script and talk about coasters that don't get enough love. Some of these get buried in their park's lineup. Some are overhated for some reason. And others pull amazing forces that nobody seems to care about other than me. Well, not just me, but sometimes it feels like it. Some of these are hidden gems in plain sight. Some of these are well-regarded coasters that I think are elite. But they're all excellent rides. These are the 15 most underrated coasters in America. I had almost 50 coasters written down as possibilities for this list, but let's just highlight 5 honorable mentions. Runaway Mountain was Premier Ride's first coaster, and is kind of a poor man's Space Mountain. No effects, but a pretty intense and twisty indoor coaster. The Schwarzkopf Wildcat models are a lot of fun. If you went to Cedar Point prior to 2012, I'm sure you rode their Wildcat, and the last one that I rode was at the Washington State Fair, and it was surprisingly great. It's a perfect family coaster. Wicked at Lagoon has a moment that you can't find on any other coaster that I know of. That vertical launch up and over the top hat. That experience alone is worth a ride, but the rest of the ride isn't bad either. Firehawk at Kings Island was tucked away behind Racer, but it was one of my favorite coasters at the park. I found it to be smoother and more enjoyable than Nighthawk and Batwing, so it's too bad that this is the one that had to go. And finally, Boomerangs. These are way too overhated, getting lumped in with the nasty SLCs. And even though they exist at every other park that you go to, I think they pull great forces, especially the feeling of going backwards through the vertical loop. Alright, let's dive into the list. Number 15. Green Lantern at Six Flags Great Adventure. I know people don't like stand-ups. I'm not a big fan of these either, but my 2019 ride on Green Lantern was actually awesome. I thought it had a good layout, from that straight drop to the order of inversions, but the intensity is probably what got to me the most. The positive G-forces on my legs was hard to take, and by the time I hit the brakes, I was wondering why this ride gets so much hate. Even for a relocated coaster, Green Lantern runs pretty smooth. If Great Adventure was my home park, I wouldn't avoid this, like so many other people seem to do. Number 14. Steel Eel at SeaWorld San Antonio. You may have your opinions about Morgan Hypers if you've ridden all the others in the US. I don't blame you. Based on my ride on Steel Force, these aren't all that good. Steel Eel is the exception, and the funny thing is that it's not even a hyper, not even close. It's 150 feet tall. The airtime at the beginning of the ride is outstanding. Even if the last run of hills is disappointing, the first half is worth the ride. These are made up of all weird shapes and sizes, but it works. You're out of your seat for a few seconds before landing hard, usually to the point where it hurts. SeaWorld San Antonio is kind of an obscure, out-of-the-way park, so I don't think Steel Eel gets the attention it deserves. Number 13. Thunderation at Silver Dollar City. Most parks have a mine train coaster, usually built by Aerodynamics, usually from the 1970s. Thunderation is one of Aero's later models, built in 1993. And the first time I rode it, I was not expecting how that ride was going to go. It starts with a slow roll out of the station and a turn to the right. And from there, it goes all the way down the mountain and picks up speed the whole way. It's by far the most thrilling mine train that I've ever ridden. And I even appreciate that it has a nice drop off the big lift that's meant to get the train back to the station. In a park full of awesome rides, Thunderation gets overlooked, but it adds a lot to the lineup. But is it the most underrated coaster at Silver Dollar City? Well, no. Number 12. The Bat at Kings Island. In a park full of huge B&Ms, Mystic Timbers, and the Beast, it's easy to overlook the Bat. But I remember when this was a Paramount park, and this Aero suspended coaster, then called Top Gun, was actually the best ride in the park. All these years later, and it's still a great suspended coaster. It's about the same ride as Vortex at Canada's Wonderland. But between that coaster's great setting and the fact that it's front and center in the park and it's still among the top coasters there, I think it gets more attention. The Bat is tucked away far off the main path, buried under an elite lineup, and shouldn't be forgotten about for anyone visiting Kings Island. Number 11. Wicked Cyclone at Six Flags New England. With all the huge RMCs opening up like Lightning Rod, Steel Vengeance, and Iron Gwazi, it's easy to look at Wicked Cyclone and think it's just one of those small hybrid conversions. But I think RMC went above and beyond with this layout. They got some experience after converting Texas Giant, Rattler, and Medusa, and by 2015, they seemed to really understand how to make a great hybrid. They also nailed the Twisted Colossus layout, but I think that gets the love it deserves. Wicked Cyclone is, in my opinion, as of January 2021, RMC's second best coaster in America. I don't know of too many other people who would give it that much praise. I may be crazy, but I loved it both times that I was at the park, 3 years apart, so I'm pretty confident in my ranking. Number 10. Fahrenheit at Hershey Park. This weird Intamin coaster looks like a combination of a Gerstlauer Eurofighter and a B&M Looper, and it's visually spectacular. I'm surprised that more parks never sprang for a model like this. After riding it in 2020, I felt like it was similar to a Blitz coaster. Sure, there's no launch, the elements are a lot bigger and drawn out, but it has all the whip and ejector airtime of Maverick, which gets praised as a top 10 coaster in the country, while Fahrenheit flies under the radar. You could argue that Fahrenheit is the best, most complete coaster at the park. I prefer Candemonium, but Stormrunner and Fahrenheit are right there at the top. Number 9. Joker at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. RMC went a different route with the Joker, starting the ride with a pair of inversions. I think it's a cool way to start, and from there, it's a well-rounded and long ride full of airtime and one more inversion. Still, Joker gets tagged as the worst RMC. I don't think it's the strongest, and it's not even in the top half, but it's not the worst one by a long shot. I do wish the airtime was stronger, like we saw with Wicked Cyclone, and that's my main knock on it. I'm sure I'm one of the only people in the coaster world that would call Joker the best coaster in Northern California. Number 8. American Thunder at Six Flags St. Louis. It's not exactly at a premier Six Flags park, which is one of the reasons why it doesn't get that much attention. But as far as GCIs go, this is absolutely one of their best. It was really the only coaster at the park that I wanted to ride more than once. So maybe it looked better to me because of its surroundings, but I still thought it had a great layout with lots of solid airtime moments. I think Lightning Racer gets more love than American Thunder, and that's a shame, because those coasters aren't even close in quality. Number 7. Powder Keg at Silver Dollar City. I wouldn't have called this S&S Air Launch coaster underrated after my first rides in 2018. Since nobody seems to talk about this ride, I didn't think I was missing anything. I had to come back in 2020 to ride it again and get the full experience, and this time, it shot up in my rankings. Like any air launch, this thing is powerful, and the first half of the ride is full of airtime. Silver Dollar City doesn't have a hypercoaster, but this kinda acts like one. Big drops, sustained airtime, lots of speed, and it ends with a lift hill and a great drop before turning into the brakes. To think this used to be a water coaster. S&S did an amazing job turning this into an elite thrill coaster. Number 6. Valravn at Cedar Point. I rode this in its opening year before I knew how most people felt about it, and I walked away from the park thinking that the two coasters I enjoyed the most were Millennium Force and Valravn. I didn't get back to the park until 2018, and by then, I knew that people seemed to hate this thing, so I rode it a few more times. Each time I got off thinking it was great. For a long time, I even had this ranked over Maverick. I like free-falling at a vertical angle from 214 feet in the air, the big inversions over the midway, the vertical drop off the midcourse. Yeah, I know it's not the most creative layout, and the vest restraints take away from some of the good airtime moments that it should have. But people really hate this coaster, and I don't get it. I guess because it's at Cedar Point, it seems out of place, and a substandard addition for the park. I don't see it that way. I just think it's a really fun ride. Number 5. Sierra Sidewinder at Knott's Berry Farm. If you saw this coaster located in Camp Snoopy, you may think it's a kid's ride. Don't be fooled. Mock Rides put some bite in this thing. It's still family friendly, but it has some intense moments that some kids won't be able to handle too well. If you have a kid and you can get on Sierra Sidewinder, which has a 42-inch height limit, and your kid loves it, then you know that you have an enthusiast in the making. I prefer this over Silver Bullet. I think it's that solid of a ride. I think it gets passed off as a family coaster, but it's so much more than that. Number 4. Gemini at Cedar Point. In a park with so many great modern thrill rides, Gemini can kinda get lost in the mix. When it opened in 1978, it was arguably the best coaster in the world. Other than getting some weird rides in 2016, I've always loved this Racing Aero Mine Train coaster. The airtime is really good. It's a long ride. Interacting with the other train adds to the experience. I have it ranked as my number 3 Aero coaster. While other enthusiasts are waiting an hour for Maverick, you can find me getting laps on Gemini. Number 3. Viper at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This is the last of the Aero Mega Loopers, and it has such a bad reputation among the general public and a lot of enthusiasts. I've met people visiting the park for the first time, and they're apprehensive about riding Viper because they hear it's super painful. I don't think it's painful at all. I think it's a monster, a speed machine, super intense, a long ride packing in 7 inversions. It's one of the most forceful rides at Magic Mountain, and it never has a line. People just have so many other options at Magic Mountain. They figure they'll skip the headache of Viper and try something newer and smoother. It's their loss. As long as Viper stays open, I'll always get my walk-on rides. Number 2. Viper at Six Flags Great America. Here's a wooden coaster that will get positive reviews when you ask about it, but you have to ask about it. It doesn't get mentioned off the top of anyone's head, especially at a park like Great America, which is stacked with great coasters. Viper is a Cyclone model, something you used to be able to find everywhere, but most of these are gone now. Viper, along with the original of course, remains. And that's because it's a great ride. It's smooth and it's loaded with airtime as it winds around itself and within itself. The park even runs this backwards quite a bit, but I prefer it forward. That's where I got my best rides. Number 1. Comet at Hershey Park. Comet and Phoenix are about an hour and a half apart, and I rode these on back-to-back days. All I heard was how great Phoenix was. I never heard anyone say a word about Comet. After riding both, I was just as impressed with Comet as I was with Phoenix. The only difference was that Comet blew away my expectations. I rode this right after riding Skyrush for the first time, and I couldn't believe that this 1946 Woody was better than the 2012 Intamin Hyper next door. Comet may not have the strongest airtime, but the whole layout is full of it, and all you have is a buzz bar keeping you in. It's got the airtime and the length to make this the best wooden coaster at Hershey Park, and a contender for the best ride in the park overall. I wouldn't go that far, but as far as coasters that I've never heard a single word about, this was about as impressed as I've ever been. Comet still seems like an afterthought at Hershey Park among enthusiasts, but it does seem to get a big line, so maybe the public understands how good this coaster is. Before I sign off, let me address 2 other coasters that I think are underrated, just because hardly anyone has gotten to ride them. One is Zippin' Pippin at Bay Beach, a gravity group at a small public park in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Everyone who has gotten to ride it loves it, but it's so far off the path of any other park that it's still kind of obscure. The other is at a park a little less obscure, Six Flags Magic Mountain. I'm talking about West Coast Racers. This was only open for 2.5 months before the park shut down in 2020, so anyone who wasn't a local didn't get much of a chance to ride it. It's such a great ride that I have it ranked 3rd in the park's history. High praise that I don't think other people will agree with me on, but since not that many people have ridden it, it's too early to deem it underrated. That's all I have for now. If you want to see the flip side of this video and check out the coasters that I think are overrated, click the link below or in my end screen. Let me know what you think of these coasters and which ones you've ridden that you consider underrated. Sound off in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.